guys, and welcome to episode 156 of the OCDstories.com podcast. Now, I want to thank you all, first of all, for tuning in again to another episode of the podcast. I appreciate your time, and wherever you are listening to this on this wonderful blue planet of ours, thank you. And today's episode is with CBT therapist Ruji Rahman. Ruji is based in London, and she works with all kinds of conditions such as depression, anxiety, but specifically in this one we'll be talking about OCD. And in it we discuss her OCD story because she herself has OCD. We talk about uncertainty, the very nature of it and working with it. We talk about bringing in compassion to therapy. We talk about adjusting therapy, so when you need to be flexible and adjust to the client, and when you need to adjust with your therapist. She talks about the importance she found in just writing down her experience. Not to necessarily share with anyone, although she is doing that now, but at the time it was just really to get it down on paper and kind of get it out of her head, so that was interesting. She talks about the importance of a therapist kind of being alongside you, guiding you, coaching you, and we go into various parts of exposure and response prevention therapy and starting ERP. Ruji was actually the therapist of one of my former podcast guests, so in this you may hear Ruji talking about a particular person, and that is one of my former podcast guests, so it's interesting to get Ruji's side of things, and hopefully you find that useful. And as always, thank you so much for listening, and without further ado, here is Ruji. On the podcast today, I have Ruji Rahman. Ruji is a London-based CBT therapist specialising in the treatment of OCD and anxiety disorders. As well as being a psychotherapist, Ruji herself has lived experience of OCD. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here. And as we're getting, one of my former guests talked about a therapist, which is you. So it's kind of a weird coincidence that you're also on here now.
It's a small world.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so as I mentioned in the intro, you have or had OCD. Be good to kind of get a bit of your OCD story.
Sure. Well, it's a long one, so I'll try to keep it as brief as I can. I guess I've experienced OCD, like a long-term OCD, for pretty much most of my life. So it started off when I was very young, and at the time, obviously, I didn't know that it was OCD. I guess I can't remember exactly what age, but I'm thinking around 12 or 13 it probably started, and it's since then it's kind of presented in, I guess, multiple forms. I think I can pretty much say that I've experienced a lot. And over the past few years in particular, I've had a couple of very serious bouts of it. So it's been really quite complex, long term. And, it did get to the point not too long ago where I was completely unable to function, housebound, and, just bedridden as well. So it literally was crippled by the condition. So that it's been quite an experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. And kind of what was the turning point for you? What finally helped you start to get better?
Well, there were lots of bumps in the road for me. It has been really quite a roller coaster. I guess initially my OCD started out more mental contamination. There were these I've had the lot, multiple, the checking, orderliness, tidiness, symmetry, the cleanliness, washing, repeating, rehearsing mentally, the what some people might call pure O. So I've had the mental rituals and the the images and urges that I feel like I need to somehow cancel out with certain other thoughts and so on. In terms of the turning point, I guess over the years, as it started to get worse, my initial very serious bout was in 2012. And at that point, I hadn't started getting help yet. I think I was kind of in denial and also slightly unsure because my OCD did present in various forms. And one of the ones that presented quite severely at that point was religious OCD, and that is something that's it's not as clearly defined as some of the other forms of OCD. So at the time I was a bit confused as to, is this OCD? Is it something, and all the intrusive thoughts were kind of mixed up in my head. So And there was a part of me thinking, I'm a therapist, I need to deal with this, I can do this, there's something in me that I can't get help or whatever, a mixture of things. So I did get some help in the end. I went to see an Islamic counselor, but unfortunately that wasn't the right approach for me. At the time, I thought that probably was what was right for me, given the nature of my OCD, being religious, being of Muslim background, and I felt that would be a good sort of integrative approach. But unfortunately, it wasn't the right approach. It wasn't successful. And so over the last few years, when I did relapse really quite badly and I was kind of unable to function, that's when I realized that, it really is CBT. I need to get specialist help for this. And I need to actually do something about this because my life is just, I see no future. This is completely crippling me. I couldn't move. I would there was one point where I was just sitting on my bed, just watching the world pass, kind of go around me. And I'm thinking, gosh, I'm in this really, really deep, dark hole. And how do I climb out of it? And, I think that was when I really needed to really got my act together and thought, right, I need to do something about this and I need to get help, the right help.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I'm glad it was effective. And did you go to the NHS or did you go privately initially?
Well, my initial sort of approach was when I was sort of referred myself to the Islamic counselor, that was private. But I was exploring both options, really, private and NHS. But it got to a point where I really felt like I needed specialists because my condition was really quite debilitating. So I guess I was fortunate in that I've worked in a number of NHS services, and I was fortunate enough to sort of, I guess, in some ways, indirectly work with various kind of senior clinicians and specialists in the field. So I had those contacts as well. So I actually contacted someone from, a specialist NHS service, and they literally went from there. They supported me the whole way. It was, the NHS in the end that I seek treatment from, and it was great. It was life-changing.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. That's really good to hear. And while you were doing therapy, was there anything else you did? Like, I always ask about lifestyle changes and other things that people can make while they're doing therapy or while they wait. Was there anything like that, or any reading or anything you did?
Oh gosh, I'm a very sort of proactive person, and it was really difficult for me when I was kind of really kind of housebound and unable to function, because I need to get things done. I need to do things. If I see a problem, I need to fix it. But at that time, I was so unwell that I knew what I needed to do, but I couldn't do it because I didn't have the ability. And it was so frustrating. So at that time, actually, I felt like my mind was doing overtime in terms of I had so many ideas. Like, I was thinking about sort of the future and my practice that, that I wanted to set up, and, the work that I wanted to do in mental health. And how I wanted to specialize in CBT and work with raising awareness. And I had sort of all these ideas and hopes. And I think that that kind of helped me sort of get through as well, because I was kind of writing down notes, like the ideas that I was thinking about. I was writing down what I'd like to do, how I can help others with this. And actually that was really quite motivating for me. It was almost like, okay, at the end of this, I've got all of these goals and these are things that I want to do. And there are other things that I'm quite an active person. So there are other things that, there are many things that I had to stop doing because of my OCD. One was like, just the hobbies and interests. So I like, I like dancing. So I used to attend sort of a lot of dance classes and things. I had to give that up. I couldn't socialize. I couldn't see friends, do anything. I wasn't able to work. So all of this had come to an end.
Yeah.
So I guess in terms of changes, as I started to come out of that sort of hole, these were things that I had to work towards. These were goals that I kind of set myself that I could start working on. And that's what I did. As I started to get into the position where I was able to start doing these things again, I was able to start doing them and start making changes to kind of my, pleasurable activities that I could start doing, thinking about work, my practice, things I enjoy, as well as sort of more day-to-day routine things like looking at my sort of daily routine, my sleep habits, which were awful, completely upside down. My, just healthy eating, changing my diet, exercise, everything. So it all played a part. It's definitely something that, I needed to focus on sort of as together.
Yeah. No, really good. And I like that. I like what you said about having and writing where you had your goals of setting up your own practice. And it was almost like it was a North Star for you. It was that thing to keep focused on when you didn't have the motivation.
It really was. It really was. The other thing that I found really, really actually quite fulfilling at the time was I started to write. I've always had an interest in sort of writing, but it was almost like it was a form of, I was reflecting on what was going on as I was writing and processing. So it almost, in my head, again, I was thinking, ahead in terms of, okay, if I write some of these things down, I was just writing my experience and how I was feeling and what it was doing to me, and just kind of just a way of processing. But that kind of actually was quite therapeutic. It kind of made me feel quite sort of good, I suppose. And I was thinking, I suppose, what I can do with that in the future. So now what I've done is use some of that information to sort of write articles and blogs. For example, I wrote an article for the OCD Action newsletter recently. And so I've actually used some of those experiences to share with others as a way of sort of, I guess inspiring others as well.
Okay, so now we'll go on to you as the therapist. Obviously, though, I'm sure you bring very much in your experience into you as the therapist. But I had one of your former clients on the show before.
Oh, right.
And they were talking about the importance of that you worked with them to develop self-compassion, because they said before they could even attempt ERP, they needed to feel like they were worthy of it and that they weren't a bad person. So I guess, what tips, strategies do you have for the listeners who want to become more compassionate to themselves?
Oh gosh, many. I think so. Like when I work with clients, and I've seen this sort of in my recovery as well as I was working on myself, compassion is just so important in any kind of with any mental health problem and treatment. But I think with OCD, because it's so crippling, it almost rips you of all dignity and pride, and you just feel like you kind of feel like you're nothing in that time when you're going through these things. And if you're kind of working through exposure, you are exposed. You sort of you feel vulnerable, and when you're working on these things, it's almost like you're seeing it in front of you, and it's so difficult. So compassion is very, very key in order for you to somehow try and retain some of that, dignity, or remind yourself that actually, what, I am worthy, and I am a good person, and this doesn't define me, and this is separate to who I am. So when I was working with the former client, I'm sure she won't mind me mentioning her name.
Well, she gave us permission, but we've decided not to.
Yeah. So she actually, so I saw her sort of for two lots of therapy, but they were very close together. And unfortunately, she had a few events happen in her life in between that were really quite difficult for her. And I guess it made it difficult for her to sort of really consolidate what she had done in the first lot of therapy. Yeah. So I think she also mentioned, I kind of see it as one sort of lot of therapy for her, because it was very close together. And the initial parts of the treatment was kind of, we did start looking at sort of the cognitive restructuring, the ERP, and getting her to really behavior expose herself. And she was great. She did absolutely amazingly well, and she did go into recovery. Unfortunately, because things happened in her life after that, she relapsed quickly. But when she came back the second time round, we sort of decided to work on sort of deeper issues, sort of looking at her beliefs, her core beliefs about herself, her self-worth, how she feels about herself. So we did a lot of work on self-esteem and compassion, and how that plays a part in all of this, how it contributes to what she thinks of herself, and then how she associates that sort of with her OCD, and how it all contributes to the maintenance of her problem. So while she definitely had the tools to work on ERP, and, really get going with, confronting those fears, there were still some things that were niggling inside, I suppose, deeper, that referred to her kind of beliefs, in a sort of core beliefs about herself. And because they are core and so deep rooted, it's something that can always be, I guess, triggered depending on, various things that may happen in your life or certain situations. So whilst she had successfully worked on the exposure, there were these things that could be potential triggers to sort of bring it back in the future. So we kind of agreed that actually working on self-esteem and looking at some of those deeper issues and beliefs would be helpful for her in terms of working on the whole kind of formulation, the whole package. I think and also in my experience as well, whilst ERP, was kind of the main method of treatment to really expose myself and overcome the problems. Before that, I did sort of work on identifying, my deeper issues, my contributing factors from a young age, things that may have affected it, how that affected me and my sort of confidence and self-esteem, and how that may relate to my OCD and how it all ties together. Because I don't think that OCD is something that is just a thing, that's affecting you. I think there are a lot of things that, contribute to it. There isn't one specific cause. There are many. And a part of that could be how you see yourself as a result of various things that you've experienced. So I think, and as well as experience that you have from others, from other situation, all of this plays a part, and in the beliefs that you may have. And I think it is really quite vital to work on compassion. And that is actually a key element of, recovery. But in terms of, I guess, providing tips for any listeners, I would say that, if there are things there that you perhaps can relate to, if you feel that actually thinking about it, doing some self-esteem work, doing some compassion work with the therapist, it could be helpful, then it's definitely worthwhile. I definitely think that it's important to be able to identify things that may be contributing to and maintaining the OCD, because actually working on some of those issues may prevent the problem from affecting you as much in the future. So I think that's great. And we did things like, I got her to write a letter to herself, which was great. And she was very, I always speak so highly of her. She was very dedicated, very motivated. And, I often found that she would do the homework task that I set her plus more. So she was always sort of ahead of her game. But, writing letters to yourself, writing down sort of, just simple things like keeping a log, positive logs of things that you've done or achieved in the day. It doesn't have to be anything big. Sometimes a simple thing like, opening a door for someone or smiling at someone can bring a positive feeling. It doesn't have to be anything, huge. And all of these things can impact on you, your worth, and how you are towards others as well.
Yeah, really, really good answer. And okay, so for people starting ERP, I guess how do you, I guess what's the conversation you have with your clients when you're bringing up the treatment of CBT, but ERP specifically? And I guess, and because sometimes when you initially talk about what it is, getting them to actually follow through and doing it, there's barriers there for some people. How do you kind of work with that?
Yeah, definitely. Well, for me, it's really important for me in any of my therapy sort of work with clients is to establish a good rapport and relationship, a very good therapeutic relationship with the client. For me, that's kind of one of the initial things that I feel are important to have there, to be in a position where the client feels able to trust me, and that they can be open and honest comfortably, that they feel safe, and obviously these are all conditions of therapy, to provide a non-judgmental, safe environment. But aside from that, I think it is important for the client and therapist to have that sort of connection as well, whilst maintaining professional boundaries, but to have that sort of therapeutic alliance that, where they feel they can open up, because I really feel that is one of the key things that helps recovery. Because if you feel comfortable with your therapist and you trust your therapist, you will want to open up. You will feel more able to open up. And these aren't things that are easy to talk about. So especially with OCD, if you're experiencing certain intrusive thoughts and you feel ashamed or embarrassed, or, you will struggle to talk about them anyway. So if you have that trusting relationship with your therapist, I guess you'll be more able to openly work on those things. And I think that is a great start if you can have that. For me, I like to work in a very collaborative way. In my therapy, I will always say to the client, look, you're in charge, you're in control. I'm just here to guide you. You tell me how you want to do it and how it works for you, and we will take it from there. And this is how ERP works. So I always provide a rationale before doing any technique, especially ERP, because it's scary. It's really scary. Just the idea of it, people initially are like, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it. And I think it's really good because if you have that sort of relationship and you can bring in I do try to bring in my personality as well. And I think humor is important. So sometimes, like, even in my therapy, like, I had a great relationship with my therapist. I went into the first kind of session or two and she was kind of like, right, put your scarf down on the floor and tread on it. I was like, you are not making me do that. You're not going to make me do that. And then a few sessions down the line, she made me do it and we had a laugh. And it was just, we had that kind of relationship where I felt comfortable to do these things and say to her, okay, you're not going to make me do that. And it's happy, it's fine and it's all good. And it kind of makes you feel able to sort of expose yourself more and really confront those fears. So for me, I really like to, tell the client how it is, in terms of rationale, how it works. And it's not that, we will throw that person into the deep end. We will work at a pace that works for the client. We will decide with the client, how you would like things to be. Obviously, we want to push you enough, but not too much. So trying to get that balance and letting them know, I suppose, without too much, without reassuring them that, they are in control of this, and we are going to work through it as it works for them. It's not something that, it's not one kind of thing fits all. It's kind of how it works for that individual. And, and I will be there to sort of support them. And I guess also any obstacles and things that may come up, we kind of think ahead of potentially what could present and how we could potentially deal with them. But for me, it's an ongoing process. It's nothing set in stone. You kind of have to work through it and constantly review and discuss and check in with the client. And I think for me that all of those things are really key.
Yeah, no, really good answer. And is there and your answer may answer this, but are there any key common questions or common sticking points you get around DRP? So I guess the question one is any common questions you get asked, whether that's like they don't quite get it or there's something in particular you don't get or anything like that.
Common questions. One of the things, I don't know if it's so much of a question, but one of the things that often is said is, well, you're just going to get me to do the things that I don't want to do. I've been trying to do this anyway by myself and it's not worked. So how is this going to help in any way? Like, how is a therapy going to make it any different? I get that one a lot, and it's, and it's understandable because it kind of makes sense, I suppose, because I guess, when I was in that situation and I was thinking, I was trying to reduce my hand washing or reduce the number of checks that I did, mentally or whatever it was. But, after a couple of tries, I kind of went back to where I was and I was just carrying on. And I'm a therapist and I know what I need to do. Yeah, I wasn't able to. So I think the answer to that would be, and this is what I say to clients often, is when you're in a therapeutic sort of setting and you're working on something with the guidance of a professional, they are there as a third party to guide you through that, because it's expected. This isn't easy. It's expected that there are going to be it's expected that you're going to try and expose yourself to some things, and it might not work out. It might fail, or it might sort of be difficult. You might need to try something differently, and these are all expected. But what I always say to clients in these situations is, this is part of the journey. Like, this is part of the recovery. It's not going to be smooth sailing, and it shouldn't be smooth sailing, because then I think something would be wrong with that. Through these dips and, falls, you are learning, I suppose. You are learning what works, what doesn't work, so that in the future, if you experience certain things, you know how to deal with it. If everything went sort of like sailing, really positively well, I guess you wouldn't be learning a lot from that. So I always say to clients that, with ERP, it is tough. I'm always honest. It's tough. It's challenging. Yet, the long-term gains outweigh by far the short-term pain, and I'm here to support you. So, we will work on it together, and we'll work on it how it works for you. And for me, like, this is what I always want to emphasize, because I know how scary it is for people, especially if you know nothing about ERP, you've never heard of it, and you go to this therapist who's saying, oh, by the way, all the things that you hate doing, I'm going to make you do. So it's really, for me, I really try to give them that understanding, and normalize that it's absolutely normal, and it's common for you to experience this.
Yeah, really good point. Okay, so the client that I interviewed also said that you did a very good job of changing approach when something wasn't working.
Right.
So, and I guess the question is kind of, how long do you kind of stick on something before adjusting it? And obviously I'm talking still within the role of CBT, but there's many aspects that make up, and obviously many parts of ERP. So maybe this is a question and answer maybe more for the therapist, but when to change approach, when to try something new, and obviously it's going to differ per client, but
well, you'll find that with every individual case is different. If I could have 10 clients experiencing OCD, but each of those 10 people may have completely different experiences, of it. So as a CBT, as especially trained in CBT, that's the kind of approach that I'm using. That's the kind of protocol, I guess. But within that, I think it's important to sort of develop idiosyncratic, sort of individualized sort of formulations for the individuals as well. So we're looking at their specific problems and their goals and needs, and I think that kind of differs one from the other. With regards to the process, and if we notice that there are perhaps sticking points, or perhaps a different approach is required, or perhaps adjustment needs to be made. And I've often found this actually, with most problems, it's quite common. Like, you need to sometimes just go with what the client has brought with you in the session, and something may not be going right that week. I don't want to go specifically into the client's problems, but one of her examples was, we were working on OCD, but there were other experiences that were going on, other events that happened in her life at that time that caused her to feel, brought on depressive symptoms more so. And so sometimes it was a kind of working on those things, and keeping the OCD work to a side slightly. And it may be that at that point, for example, if it's low mood, if something's happened, where it may just be a bit of counselling, it may be a bit of sort of just talking through and listening to them, and sort of referring back to sort of the formulation and how that plays a part maybe in their OCD, and what it's doing to the OCD, and perhaps how it can be sort of brought into the formulation. Because the formulation, as we know, is a model that's forever changing. Things will happen, and there will be various things that we need to work on. And, you may take things out of the formulation, put things into the formulation. So I guess when we're working with change, for me, I sometimes I think it could be that, doing some compassion work. So, as part of our CBT training, we are trained in approaches like, compassion focused therapy, mindfulness, and so on. So these are, some third wave kind of therapies that we can incorporate. So it may be at a time like that, actually something like mindfulness might be helpful, a bit of compassion work, as we did with this client, a bit of counselling around what's going on with them at the moment. But essentially CBT is kind of the main approach. It's just that sometimes some adjustments may need to be made within those kind of guidelines, I guess, in terms of what is required for the client.
No, it did. That was a really good answer, and probably a tricky question because, as you said, it's kind of how long is a piece of string type question. It really differs, right? But no, that was good.
I think that answers it.
You did. Okay, so this is a real general question, but it's one I love asking, which is just advice or words of wisdom for living with uncertainty, which seems to be the whole, for me at least, is the pinnacle question of OCD. If you can live with the uncertainty, OCD's gone. Not gone, but it's beaten to a point, right?
Yeah, it's really like OCD, uncertainty and doubt are like the two things that really keep this problem going. And it's just, trying to tolerate uncertainty is difficult for anyone.
Yeah.
But for those who I guess are a bit more sort of prone to that kind of way of being, OCD really likes to get hold and take a grip of them. So what was your question? You asked?
Just advice for living with uncertainty.
Advice for living with uncertainty. Gosh, it's probably advice I could probably give myself as well. I would say that you can't. One of the things I think to think about is what are the pros and cons of, being certain or trying to be certain or not. For example, you could really, if we can't tolerate a certain, uncertainty, we're striving to be certain with things all the time. And is that realistic? So it might be a question to ask yourself, is it actually realistic? And for me, trying to, take this approach, what is it doing to me? So what are the costs of this? What is it doing to my life? How is it impacting on me and my functioning? Is it actually beneficial for me striving to be certain with everything, or certain things that matter to me all the time? Is it actually possible? Is it realistic? And what are the consequences of that? What is it doing to me? Is it worth it? And the opposite. So if I was to perhaps think about, okay, sometimes I may need to just tolerate uncertainty and just go with it. How would my life be different? What would I be doing differently? How would I be feeling? Because right now, in struggling with this, trying to tolerate uncertainty, I'm kind of, I'm talking generally, I guess, is that you're exhausted. It's distressing. It's impacts on your life, and it holds you back. So what are you gaining from that? And the costs of what you're doing at the moment in trying to gain that certainty may actually be more severe than if you didn't have that certainty. It can actually be really crippling. So I guess what I would say is ask yourself kind of what realistically are you sort of going to gain by trying to sort of aim for that certainty? Are there situations where actually learning to sort of manage some of that, uncertainty and in tolerating it and be open to doing that? Could there be benefits of it? Because I think if you start thinking about, or even writing down, I think doing a cost benefit analysis and writing down the pros and cons can be helpful, because you can then see in front of you, actually, if I try to do things slightly differently and actually try to tolerate that uncertainty a bit more, my life could be like this. I could achieve this, that, and the other. And if you see the difference, it might encourage you to then actually try and aim for that in a way, and be a bit more sort of I guess a bit more lenient with yourself and not as tough on yourself. So I think that's usually a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah, it's a really good approach. Like you said, sometimes you need that reason to accept the uncertainty. Accepting that uncertainty is a very scary thing to do.
It is,
so you need a reason to do it.
You do, and unfortunately you can't always have a reason. And I guess if you make use of the tools that you've been learning in CBT in challenging some of those thoughts that are making it difficult for you to at least to try to attempt to tolerate uncertainty, what is it? Are you using any unhelpful thinking styles there? Is your thinking, are there any biases there in your thinking that are making it difficult for you? Because I think, again, as a CBT approach is, you're incorporating both the cognitive and behavioral. So you want to, like, I firmly kind of believe that, yes, I think there's an element where you should perhaps try and think about the thoughts and if there's a different way of looking at them, but then try to implement those through your behavior. So, you know, if you're struggling with, you know, this kind of, I can't tolerate uncertainty because of X, Y, and Z, perhaps identify some of those thoughts. Are they negative? Are there any unhelpful thinking styles you're using there? What's an alternative way of looking at it? And, you know, what are those fears and beliefs that you have? Perhaps you can test them out with some behavior experiments or, you know, exposure, you know, to find actually, are these fears true, and put them into practice and kind of see where you go with that. And it may be that you learn something completely different. So again, you know, it's about kind of, I guess, being quite proactive, but wanting to sort of try and experiment with some of those ideas, and you're making use of the tools that you have learned, and, you know, any professionals that you kind of are working with, and in trying to guide you through that, because it's a very, very scary place to be. And it's completely understandable that, you know, it's anxiety, you know, it's just huge intense anxiety, isn't it, when you're trying to work on that. So, you know, if there's a way of challenging some of those thoughts that make it difficult for you, it might help you in the implementation of the behavior, I guess.
Yeah, no, really good. Yeah, I love it. Okay, so what do you notice from your clients that seem to recover or make progress much quicker? Is there something you notice in those particular people?
I think what I tend to notice is when a client starts going into recovery and is finding that they are overcoming some of the very difficult things that they never even imagined that they could, at that point, it's almost like something shifts in them where they're kind of like, you know, I never thought I would ever be able to do that. Like when I initially came in to see you, I just thought there's no way that I'm going to ever be like that or be able to do that. And I said the same thing to my therapist, which is strange. But I noticed that shift in, well, huge shift in confidence. You know, they noticed that actually I can do this. So there's that confidence and you know, and the motivation, because that confidence then enables them to do more, to try and fight even more, so push the OCD even more, because recovery is a long-term process. You know, you may expose yourself and start to confront some of those fears, but then it's a case of then can you go that little bit further and push it, you know, go anti-OCD and really test it out, you know, and the shift enables them to do that, to encourage them to sort of, you know, push it even more, really try to take hold of it and show who's in control. And they seem in control, and their mood is, you know, totally different. You know, initially when they come in, they're, you know, feeling distressed, huge anxiety, the intrusive thoughts are just, you know, eating them up. When you notice them going to recovery and that shift occurs, you see it, you know, in their face, the expressions, the smiles, and, you know, that alone, sometimes just looking at them, you can see that change in them. So it's a combination of things. And it's not just through the ERP, it's everything, like we mentioned earlier, the lifestyle changes, because a lot of what OCD is very, very debilitating. And one of the things that one of the really, really difficult things is it takes away so much of your life. It has such a debilitating effect on your life that, you know, you're kind of stripped away of everything. So when clients start regaining some of those things in their life, even basic things, it really is really quite life-changing for them, and that affects the mood in a really, really positive way. So I guess I've seen that a lot, and it's great. It's really amazing, and you know, it is treatable, and that's the thing. And I think with me, it's always kind of like, I really want to get you out of this, and I know it's possible, so let's do it. It's very kind of hands-on. Let's go for it. So, it's, you know, I think that I see a number of things, and one of them is confidence and starting to sort of love themselves again and be happy. Yeah.
No, I like it. And okay, so if you could pick up the phone and call your 20-year-old self, what would you tell her?
What would I tell her? Lots of things. I think one of the things I would say to her is speak out, tell someone. You know, the nature of OCD is that it's almost like a silent disorder. I think one of the main things about it is it tries to keep you all to yourself, like to itself. I mean, it's like if I have this person to myself, I can attack them as much as I want to without sort of any external sort of input. And that is the thing, because the nature of obsessive thoughts or urges or images, whatever it may be, they're very intrusive, and to the individual, it's almost like you feel a bit odd, a bit weird. I just thought I was odd initially. It's kind of like, why do I have these thoughts? You don't want to share it with someone. It's embarrassing. But that's the thing. That's the thing that one of the things that OCD uses to really take grips and really have a hold on you. It's almost like, oh, well, you're not going to say anything about this because it's embarrassing, and and these are a bit strange, these thoughts that you're having. So you need to keep it to yourself. And now I'm just going to attack you more with it. So I think one of the things that I would have said to my 20-year-old self is speak, because that just tell someone, say something, because that is the first and probably one of the hardest steps to take in challenging your OCD, because you're actually coming out of that circle where it's just you and the OCD, and you're bringing a third party into it, and the OCD doesn't like that because it's a bully. So by you doing that, not only are you taking that initial step, it's a very difficult step, but you're working towards, it's that first step towards challenging and recovery, and it's a step towards improving your confidence, because when you speak to someone, you'll see what they come back with and how things may develop for you. And that is, I guess, a start to change, and a change of, you approaching the OCD differently. So I think that's what I would have said to my 20-year-old self is don't keep it in, just say something to someone and see where it goes. It doesn't have to be a lot, just, anything. Show that OCD boss.
That was a good phone call.
It's been a long one.
Okay, so you've got a billboard in central London. What do you want written on that billboard?
Oh, wow. Gosh. What would I want written on the billboard? If there is something that's holding you back, a fear or whatever it may be that's holding you back in life, I guess the only way to really confront it would be to do the opposite. Do something completely opposite to what you're thinking or feeling, and see what happens. I like it. Good advice. Okay, brilliant. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you wish you could have shared? Gosh, we've spoken quite a lot about various points. Is there anything? I don't think so. I think we've covered everything. One thing that I would say is, just for sort of, I guess, the listeners out there, is sometimes it can feel like you're very alone when you're experiencing something like this, and can feel extremely lonely. You could have all people around you but feel extremely lonely at the same time. But all of these things are really normal, because some of these things that really make it difficult for people to, seek help or speak to someone. And it isn't necessarily that you need that other person to really understand the problem itself, but actually understand that you are struggling. Just understand that you're having a difficult time and they're there for you. And that can help a lot. So what I would sort of say to, other sufferers out there who may be struggling to get help or, have certain reservations about it, is it does get easier. And I know it's easy for me to say, but, it really does. And there are people out there who do really genuinely want to help. And we're fortunate here because we have a number of specialist services that are amazing in what they're doing. And I was fortunate enough to experience that. So, if you're unsure about anything, if you're not sure where to go, ask somebody, pick up the phone. I always say to people, pick up the phone and ask me if you'd like, it doesn't have to be with me. I'm happy to sort of give you advice on, whatever, and anything that I feel may be helpful for you. And you never know where that could lead you, because I had that. I had someone say to me, you know what, do this, this might help. And, there are various things that I have a lot of the knowledge myself, yet sometimes you just need that guidance, a bit of push, and it can be really helpful. So I would say try and sort of have that faith and perhaps share something if you can, and do something about it, because you just don't know where it could lead you.
Yeah, great words, and a great way to end. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, and everything you've shared.
Great. Thank
Yeah.
you for having me. It was lovely talking to you.
So there you have it. Really hope you enjoyed my chat with Ruji. Everything will be on the show notes at theocdstories.com/podcast. And if you'd like to leave a review for this show, it would mean a lot to me. And you can do that over wherever you listen to it, iTunes or any Android podcast app. But quick disclaimer, guys, this podcast is not therapy. It is not a replacement for therapy. Please seek treatment from a trained professional. Until we speak, take care.